The Tiger, one of the most famous and feared tanks of World War II, legendary for its strength and impenetrable armor. But what if I told you that this unstoppable giant was actually its own greatest enemy? Did the Tiger destroy more of its own than its enemies, or did it, in fact, destroy itself? Many believe the Tiger was the most powerful tank on the battlefield. But what if all those myths about its invincibility were just propaganda? In this video, we'll break down those myths and analyze the Tiger for what it really was, based on real facts. Prepare yourself to learn the truth you might not have wanted to hear. In the early 1940s, the German army faced a major problem. Its tanks were not powerful enough to counter the Soviet T-34s, which were dominating the battlefields of Eastern Europe. The Soviet T-34, with its exceptional armor and agility, became a nightmare for German forces. Germany was forced to respond. They needed new, more powerful tanks. The Tiger was created as a direct answer to the threat posed by Soviet tanks, but also as an attempt to overcome the firepower and armor advantage that the Soviets held. The army was looking for a tank with exceptionally thick armor, a powerful gun, and the ability to destroy enemy tanks from long distances. But things weren't so simple. As engineers worked on the design, increasing weight, more complex systems, and production issues began to emerge. Thus, the Tiger was born a tank with armor as thick as 100 millimeters, designed to be a true war giant. However, this extraordinary armor also came with serious challenges: mobility problems, high fuel consumption, and overloaded engines. The engineering decisions behind the Tiger laid the foundation for a tank that would become famous, but also widely criticized across the world. One of the Tiger's most notable features was its armor. With its 100 millimeter thick armor, it was often touted as impervious. However, the reality was much more complex. The armor, although exceptionally strong on paper, couldn't always stop incoming fire. Why? The main problem lay in the angles. The armor was not effective from every angle. In some places, shells would strike the steel at unfavorable angles, penetrating through it. This factor reduced its effectiveness, especially when the tanks were attacked from the sides or from underneath. While Tigers were strong against weaker tanks, their power was greatest at longer ranges. The 88 millimeter gun could destroy an enemy tank before it even got close. On the battlefields of North Africa and Eastern Europe, the Tiger's range advantage allowed it to strike enemy tanks before they had a chance to return fire. But the Tiger's real strength lay in its gun. The 88 millimeter gun was extremely effective against most tanks of the time. With powerful shells, it could penetrate the armor of nearly every enemy tank, including British and Soviet models. While it was highly effective against other tanks, the Tiger's gun was also used to destroy infantry and infrastructure, making it even more dangerous on the battlefield. However, all these advantages were somewhat diminished by the complex design and maintenance issues. Despite that, Tigers were still respected for their firepower and ability to dominate opponents on the battlefield. Although the Tiger was extremely powerful on the battlefield, its production was a logistical nightmare for Germany. The complicated design, complex engineering requirements, and a shortage of key resources slowed production at every step. After World War I, Germany was banned from developing advanced weapons, including tanks. This prohibition, set by the Treaty of Versailles, significantly delayed the development of Germany's military industry, leaving Germany far behind other countries in terms of weapon modernization. As a result, Germany had to quickly catch up when it began preparations for World War II.
The Tiger was developed in response to the threat posed by advanced Soviet tanks, like the T-34 and KV-1. But while it was impressive in combat, the logistical challenges of producing and maintaining it were enormous. Instead of becoming a standard part of every armored division, Tigers were organized into special heavy tank battalions, each consisting of around 45 tanks. These battalions were temporarily attached to different divisions, wherever a decisive strike was needed.
Furthermore, Germany didn't have enough resources to support mass production of Tigers. By the end of the war, only about 300 of these tanks were produced, far fewer than needed to make the Tiger a decisive factor on all fronts. In the end, the Tiger remained a symbol of power, but logistical obstacles and production issues limited its effectiveness on the battlefield. Although the Tiger was undisputed in firepower, it faced serious problems on the ground. One of the biggest challenges was its weight. Weighing around 55 tons, the Tiger was too heavy for many parts of the battlefield. and its maneuverability was limited. The first Tigers showed their weaknesses during the Battle of Kursk, where many of them got stuck in the mud. Due to its excessive weight, the Tigers had a hard time moving across wet and marshy terrain. This problem wasn't isolated. Similar situations occurred throughout Europe during the war. In mud, snow, and on poor roads, the Tiger became a difficult opponent, but also a prime target for enemies. Despite its robust design, fuel consumption issues were relentless. The Tiger consumed enormous amounts of fuel, 3-4 times more than other tanks of the time. On the battlefield, this meant that German forces had to constantly secure fuel, which often became a problem in areas far from logistical centers. Maintaining Tigers on the front lines was nearly impossible without constant repairs. Although these tanks proved highly effective, many broke down quickly due to engine, armor, and other vital system failures. Practically, every Tiger required specialized equipment and technicians, which were in high demand on the battlefield, slowing down attacks and making them easier to target. German logistical lines couldn't support this type of military machinery. Tanks were difficult to repair because specialized parts and training were required. Logistical problems often focused on maintaining the Tigers, making them vulnerable to enemy attacks, and their numbers on the battlefield decreased. So, while the Tiger was formidable on the battlefield, its maneuverability and logistical issues reduced its overall effectiveness and contributed to the fact that, despite its strengths, it wasn't a decisive factor in the final outcome of the war. The Battle of Kursk in 1943 was the largest tank battle in history, and the Tiger was at the heart of the conflict. The German army sent its best units in an attempt to break the Soviet defense, but the Tigers faced serious challenges on the battlefield. On one hand, the Tiger's advantages were clear. With its thick armor and powerful gun, it could destroy nearly any Soviet tank before it even got close. Tigers dominated on open battlefields, where they could use their range and firepower to destroy enemies from a distance. However, maneuverability problems soon became evident. On the western parts of Kursk, in dense forests and marshes, the Tiger's weight became a serious issue. In these conditions, the Tigers had a much harder time moving, which meant they became easy targets for the Soviets' faster and more agile tanks. The Soviet T-34, with better armor and better angles for deflecting shells, was serious competition. Although it had a weaker gun, its mobility and lighter weight allowed it to perform better in difficult battlefield conditions. The Soviets used their numerical superiority with thousands of T-34 tanks, while Germany was limited in the number of Tigers. Similarly, in North Africa, Italy, and France, Tigers faced different challenges. In the dry, dusty terrain of North Africa, logistical and fuel consumption issues were even more apparent. In Italy and France, where tanks had to fight in urban conditions, Tigers were highly effective at destroying buildings and infantry, but they still struggled with maneuverability. Soviet and Allied forces responded faster and used their smaller, more mobile tanks with less armor, while Tigers, despite superior firepower, were vulnerable on more difficult terrains and poor logistical support that slowed them down and made them vulnerable on the front lines. After the British captured several Tigers during the war, their analysis was clear. The Tiger was overly complicated and hard to maintain. British military analysts found that the Tiger's design was filled with complex systems that made it difficult to repair and maintain on the battlefield. Too many components, from the engine to electronics, were overly specialized, which made every Tiger prone to serious breakdowns after being in combat for just a few days. Moreover, logistical issues were unavoidable. The complicated parts required specialized workers and equipment, which further slowed repairs. This overly complicated design, according to British analysts, didn't justify the high cost and resources required to produce and maintain the tank. On the other hand, the Soviet T-34 was much simpler, easier to maintain, and cheaper to produce. Although its armor was weaker than the Tigers, the design was optimized for mass production. The T-34 had better angles for deflecting shells and better mobility on the battlefield. The speed of production for the Soviets was key. The Soviet Union produced thousands of T-34s during the war. Despite the Tiger's advanced design, the key to success on the battlefield was not just firepower and armor. It was also logistics, mobility, and overall simplicity of the design. The Soviets, as well as the Allies, had understood that having thousands of tanks and being able to maintain and repair them was more important than creating a handful of powerful but vulnerable tanks. Although there were significant logistical and maneuverability issues, the Tiger had remarkable strengths that made it dominant on the battlefield when properly used. Its greatest advantage, of course, was its firepower. The Tiger was armed with an 88mm gun, capable of destroying nearly any enemy tank or armored unit at long ranges. Combined with its exceptional armor, the Tiger was practically unstoppable in direct confrontations with the enemy, destroying tanks like the T-34 and M4 Sherman. But its firepower wasn't just a technical advantage, it also had a psychological impact on the enemy. When the Tiger appeared on the battlefield, its recognizability and intimidating appearance often led to panic among enemy troops. The mere sight of the Tiger could cause morale to break, with many soldiers fleeing or surrendering before attempting to engage such a powerful tank. This made the Tiger an effective weapon not just on the battlefield, but also in psychological warfare. When used properly, the Tiger also had tactical advantages. In an environment where it could be used for direct attacks on enemy lines, the Tiger was dominant. In situations where it was necessary to break through enemy defensive lines or support infantry, the Tiger acted as an unstoppable machine of destruction. However, this depended on good command and strategy. Although powerful in itself, the Tiger required proper coordination and support to fully exploit its strengths. When the conditions were right, open terrain, proper support, and strategic use, the Tiger was one of the most fearsome and deadliest tanks of World War II. The Tiger was definitely one of the most powerful tanks in history, but it wasn't without its significant weaknesses. Despite its exceptional firepower and nearly impenetrable armor, problems with logistics, production, and maneuverability often made it vulnerable in battle. The German army faced great challenges in maintaining and deploying Tigers, which ultimately reduced their effectiveness on the front lines. Through our analysis, it's clear that many of the myths about the Tiger were based on propaganda and legends that developed during the war. Popular narratives about the invincible Tigers destroying everything in their path didn't always reflect the real conditions on the battlefield. Myths of its invincibility were often emphasized in German war propaganda, while the Allies, particularly the British and Soviets, argued that the Tiger was too complicated, slow, and difficult to maintain. Why did the legend of the Tiger survive? One reason is undoubtedly the psychological impact it had on the enemy. The mere sight of this tank invoked fear and respect, which contributed to its legendary status. Additionally, its high status in popular culture, films, and books further reinforced the image of the Tiger as an invincible killing machine. However, when we look at the real picture, it's clear that the Tiger was an important tool on the battlefield, but it wasn't invincible. In many situations, the Soviet T-34, British Sherman, or even American tanks, with lighter armor but better design and production, were more effective in combat. The Tiger certainly played a significant role in the conflict, but it wasn't a deciding factor. Ultimately, the Tiger was a symbol of technological power and tactical innovation, but also of major mistakes in strategy and production. When all factors are considered, we can conclude that the Tiger was an extremely powerful tank, but with weaknesses that ultimately diminished its overall effectiveness on the battlefield. So, while it was an icon of wartime technology, the Tiger was not invincible. It was merely another reminder that quantity and logistics often outweigh even the strongest technological innovations on the battlefield. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Tiger and want to learn more about the history and legendary war machines, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More analyses, myths, and truths about the most famous war vehicles, their strengths, weaknesses, and impact on history are coming soon. Follow us for more.